Planning Commission meeting of May 19th will come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The secretary will call roll, please.
Commissioner Hodge,
Here.
Commissioner Rice,
Here.
Commissioner Gray,
I'm here.
Vice Chairperson Tolson,
Here.
Chairperson Mann.
Here. May I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion was made by Commissioner Tolson. Do I have a second?
I second.
A second by, will take Commissioner Gray. Unless there's any objections, the agenda will stand approved. May I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Motion was made by Commissioner Rice, or do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gray. Unless there's any objections, the minutes will stand approved. Declaration of conflict. The secretary will read the declaration of conflict, please.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should declare at this time.
Do we have any declarations of conflict? Hearing none, we'll move on to public statements. This is the time allotted for public statements or comments for all items other than public hearing items due to the closure of City Hall, council chambers, and to the public in compliance with Executive Order N-2920. Public statements are to be accommodated via Zoom. Did we receive any requests from any individual who would like to make a public statement?
Chairman Mann, members of the commission, we did receive a public correspondence which was provided to you prior to the meeting and placed here on the dais. And we did not receive any requests for Zoom public statements.
Thank you. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director, City Planner?
And I think I,
Cover that.
no, that's item 8. Yes, Chairman Mann, members of the commission, we did receive a supplemental item for item 10A1 regarding the hotel project, which are 2 written correspondence, and we'll put those into the record.
Thank you very much. Let's see, we have no consent calendar. So continued business. Let me get to my little script. This is the time and place set for continued public hearing on consideration of CUP S744, MOD number 1, and Z-S-751, and the negative declaration. Are there any ex parte communications to report? I have the only one. I believe the applicant, Philip Terry, called. Him and I spoke briefly regarding if I thought there was any needed items that were not provided for. I told him I hadn't had time to look at the materials yet, but I would look at it and see him here tonight. Okay, may we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Good evening, Chairman Mann, members of the Planning Commission. Yes, this is the continued public hearing for the hotel project at 2585 Cochran Street, along with the zone text amendment regarding hotel parking calculations. Our associate planner, Narangunu Sakara, cannot be here tonight, so our principal planner, Claudia Pedroso, is here tonight to present the project. Claudia?
Good evening, Chairperson and members of the commission. First of all, can everybody see my screen? Can you see the full screen of the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Great. So let me just move this over here. Thank you. So the request that you have in front of you is an application from Land Developer and Associates Corporation, who's requesting approval of a modification to a conditional use permit to construct a hotel on a 1.64 acre vacant site located at 2585 Cochrane Street. It also includes a development code update to reduce the parking requirements for hotels and motels citywide, and also includes a negative declaration. The project site is shown north of Cochrane, just south of the 118 freeway. And on the west side, there are existing residences, and on the east side, there's an existing shopping center. This shopping center contains the stores like Big Lots and Do It Center. This picture shows the existing conditions of the site with the houses on the west side of the property. And what you see in front of you over here is the existing the block wall that is at the property line. The original project was approved by the Planning Commission in December 2014, and in 2019 August, the applicant submitted an application to modify the project. The staff presented the revised design at the November 4th, 2020 Planning Commission hearing, at which time the hearing was continued due to a number of concerns expressed by the Planning Commission. For reference, this is a site plan for the project, including a 10-foot landscaping buffer along the west side of the property. The project includes 98 hotel rooms and 79 parking spaces. This rendering shows the project as it was presented to the Planning Commission on November 2020. Note that the 66-foot high bell tower shows taller than the entire lobby tower and the rest of the building. The Planning Commission continued the hearing for the applicant to research and provide more information on the following items: to eliminate the bell tower, increase the westerly property line block wall to 8 feet, include additional information for the park analysis, and consider a shared parking agreement with property to the south. The following slides show the applicant's response. The first two recommendations from the commission were that the commission was concerned about the overall height of the building and suggested eliminating the 66-foot high bell tower. The applicant eliminated the bell tower and provided a shorter tower that is less in height than the lobby tower, which is 56 feet. Also, the commission asked the applicant to consider a condition to raise the property wall on the west side to 8 feet, and also directed the applicant to consult with the neighbors on this. The applicant agreed to the 8-foot wall as a condition of approval and advised the commission that they would consult with the neighbors about raising this wall. Does these rendering colors appear to be different? The applicant is not making any changes to the approved materials and colors. This is just a printing change. This elevation over here, the top one shows the previous west elevation with the bell tower at 66 feet and 10 inches. And the revised elevation shows the elimination of the bell tower portion and just lowering the tower to stand lower than the lobby tower, which is 56 feet and 10 inches. The north elevation, as viewed from the 118 freeway, it shows you the before, as the bell tower was on the building before in the previous design, and on the right, you see the revised tower being lowered. With the removal of the bell tower, the top of the hotel will continue to be visible from the 118 freeway, but given the angle, it is unlikely that any hillside views will be blocked. So on the left, we have the previous design with the bell tower, and on the right, you have the revised design without the bell tower. This slide shows the location of the property line wall that will be increased to 8 feet high. And that the applicant had agreed to condition A-18 that requires for the wall to be increased to 8 feet high. A more comprehensive parking study was requested to support the proposed zone text amendment. A new study was submitted that included analysis of additional comparable hotels for 7 days. The results of the study will be discussed in a few slides later. The applicant was also encouraged to pursue a shared parking agreement with a commercial building to the south of the project site. The applicant advised staff that the owners of the building to the south were looking to sell the property and were not in a position to engage in any parking agreement. Following the last hearing, the applicant provided a study that conducted more extensive 7-day parking counts for 6 hotels in and around Simi Valley and neighboring cities. The counts included weekends and were done from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. and counted the ratio of the spaces of spaces per room booked. The applicant also confirmed that the hotels were not being used for COVID quarantines at the time. This table shows the data that was collected, and it shows that the peak parking demand in the study was 79% for the Grand Vista and Courtyard Marriott, with an average peak demand of 77%. This peak parking demand shown captures the parking required for both hotel guests and employee parking. The Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE, the parking generation manual indicates that a hotel of 99 rooms or less will require 0.83 parking spaces per hotel room. The applicant's site-specific study shows a peak parking demand of 0.79 parking spaces per hotel room, with the average of 0.77. Also, data shows the maximum hotel occupancy between January 2018 and February 2020 was about 86.7%. In addition, there's an increase in ride sharing and reduction in car rentals, and the future use of autonomous vehicles makes the 0.8 parking ratio proposed per hotel more reasonable. Therefore, the proposed code amendment of 0.80 parking spaces per room is supported by the analyzed site-specific data. Staff proposed to separate the requirements for hotels with more than 100 rooms or less than 100 rooms. For hotels with more than 100 rooms, the current standards will remain unchanged. For hotels with less than 100 rooms, the requirement will be 0.8 spaces per guest room, and that will include guest parking as well as employee parking. Additionally, staff recommends that for the hotels with 100 or fewer rooms, that a site-specific parking study be required if that hotel wishes to provide restaurants or conference facilities open to the public and not just to the guest. The proposed revisions to the zoning code are shown here with the changes underlined. This table shows the hotels in Simi Valley, the number of rooms for each hotel, and if this new code amendment will potentially affect these hotels. As you can see, both the Holiday Inn Express and Motel 6 could potentially be expanded based on the recommended parking ratio of 0.8 per room, parking spaces per room. The Courtyard by Marriott was approved in 2019 for the addition of 16 rooms and other modifications. The other modifications have been made, but the rooms have not been added yet. But once the addition is completed, the total number of rooms will be 114. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of CUP, a modification, the Development Code update, and the project negative declaration. This concludes my presentation, and staff is available for questions.
Do any commissioners have any questions of staff?
Yes.
By all means, please, go ahead.
Ms. Pedroso, a couple slides back, you said the Institute for Traffic Engineers suggested 0.83 sites per room, and yet we have 0.80 spaces per room. What was the reasoning behind that? You went through it kind of fast, and I apologize. I just didn't.
I think
How
Mr. Link
did
wants
we
to
come to
address,
that?
Mr. Link wants to address that question.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Rice, the surveys that are done are not necessarily analogous to Simi Valley. They cover, actually I have that here, might take me a minute. But they cover Arizona, California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, New York, Texas, and Washington. So there is a varied amount of data that comes from across the country, and on the basis of the parking study that was performed by the applicant, it was determined that 0.8, even though that the ITE parking generation was higher, that it was more analogous to Ventura County and Simi Valley.
But if we change it to 0.8, this goes forward as 0.8. And so this would apply to any new project in the city as well.
That's correct.
Yeah, the difference is 2.3 spaces. That's my only point here. So I'm just curious for the 2.3 spaces. But anyway, thank you. That was my only question.
Any other questions of staff?
I have a question.
By all means, Commissioner Hodge.
Yes, can we go back to the second to the last page in the presentation? Nope. There you go, excellent. All right, so the Courtyard by Marriott currently has 98 rooms and it's approved for 16 additional rooms. So I'm not exactly sure. They were approved, this approval for the 16 additional rooms in 2019, they won't be affected. Have they already built those rooms?
They have not built those rooms yet.
Okay, now that would put them over 100, correct?
That is correct.
They were originally approved at 1 space per
For the standard,
room,
yeah,
and they would still be required to have that because they're now over 100 rooms, correct?
that is correct.
All right, so moving forward, how do you see this being applied? Where, say, for example, you have a property that has 90 rooms and they're at 0.8 spaces per, and they want to come along and add something. They want to add a conference room, or they want to add, well, forget the conference room, because I understand the answer would be that they would have to put together a parking study, and it would have to be approved. But if they wanted to add additional rooms, would you expect that they're going to have to provide 1.0 parking spaces per room because they go over the 100? Would they be required to add 0.1 room for each additional room over 100? How do you anticipate that applying?
The way we anticipated that if they come in with a proposal that is going to go over the 100 rooms, then it's going to be treated as a hotel over 100 rooms. So in this case, for example, if the Courtyard Marriott were to propose right now the additional 16 rooms, they would be parked at the 1 per plus guest parking plus everything else. Employee parking, everything else.
That's a pretty stark difference between the need for parking in different properties. Was there any explanation as to why hotels with 100 rooms or more should be seen as different, say, for example, to a hotel with 90 rooms?
From the research that we've done, when you have hotels that have more than 100 rooms, they usually have more amenities, including meeting rooms. Sometimes they have restaurants or they have some kind of food service. And that's kind of relates to needing the additional parking space. If you notice, like in this case, the Motel 6 and the Holiday Inn Express, neither one of those have a meeting room or a restaurant. So when you deal with more than 100 rooms, most of the times you do have additional services provided.
Okay, well, the reason I would say, even on this grid here, we have the extended stay has 104 rooms, no meeting rooms, no restaurants. They would have to come up with 1 parking space per room, or 104 parking spaces, plus parking spaces for employees, correct?
They will have to meet the current code, yes.
I'm just trying to, look at this and wonder if we're being too stringent on the hotels with 100 rooms or more, with this assumption that they would have more services when they in fact may not have more services. And if they do have those services, then maybe we should have an ordinance that addresses that, as we have with hotels under 100 rooms. They're at 0.8, or if this gets approved, it would be at 0.8. But if they have meeting rooms or restaurants, then they have to come up with a parking proposal or parking study that has to be approved. I'm wondering if we should really be looking at the whole thing saying 0.8, unless you have meeting rooms or restaurants, and then you have to come up with a parking proposal like hotels with less than 100 rooms, and sort of focusing less on the number of rooms and more on the amenities and services that are being provided.
That's definitely an item that the commission can suggest.
Okay, that's my question right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Rice?
I have no other questions of staff.
You push your little button, by
Oh, I
the way.
did? I'm sorry. No, I
See?
didn't. Oh, I guess I did.
See, look at that.
There we go.
Any other commissioners have any questions?
I do. I do.
Vice Chair Tolson?
Thank you very much. I should have pushed my, there you go. When we were doing in our previous couple meetings, talking about the housing element, I asked a question that after we're done with that process, would there be a potential change to look over the current status of our parking restrictions? And that Stratus Peros said that that would potentially be something to be looked at and maybe changed. In the time it takes for us to approve this, and then the housing element finishes up in the third quarter of this year, is a potential that by the time he even breaks ground, is it possible that our parking restrictions might be modified?
Yeah, Vice Chairman Tolson, our parking chapter is one of the code updates that we are looking at. We're doing a number of cleanup items, and in conjunction with the housing element from some aspects, and also with economic development purposes, we are looking at those things. Specifically on the hotel parking calculation, as indicated in these past couple meetings, it's a little more complicated to figure out a parking ratio for hotels, but it will still be some time before any hotel calculation comes about. So it probably won't be this year, but for any finalization to that.
Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, then let's go ahead and let's open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Would the applicant like to present the project?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead, Mr. Singh.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Honorable Planning Commissioners and City staff. We again appreciate the opportunity to present our modification request to develop a Marriott Fairfield Inn development proposal. The property was acquired just over 10 years ago on June 11th. Shortly afterwards, an application was filed requesting approval to develop a hotel. On December 3, 2014, the Planning Commission approved our hotel development proposal request. Approximately 2 years ago, a modification to the December 3rd, 2014 Planning Commission approval was filed with the city. This request reduced the room count by 8. It proposed a 4-story hotel, pushed the proposed hotel further east, and requested a reduction in the parking requirement. At the last Planning Commission hearing, there was no opposition to the proposed development. In fact, there was tremendous support for this proposal. There were over 10 people from the public who spoke in favor of the project. Previously, we submitted a petition signed by residents from the neighboring community in favor of the proposed project development of the Marriott Fairfield Inn hotel development. Just prior to the November 4th, 2020 Planning Commission hearing, we presented our proposal development to the Neighborhood Committee and received approval. At the November 4th, 2020 Planning Commission hearing, staff recommended approval. At this hearing, after listening to staff recommendations for approval, significant community support, and the commissioners The commissioner's discussion, it seemed the planning commission responded very favorably to the Santa Barbara architecture and were okay with a 4-story hotel located next to the freeway, adjacent to commercial on the east side, setback and blocked from view by retail building to the south and residential from the west. After the November 4th commission hearing, the commission offered continuance to reduce the height of the bell tower, asked us, the applicant, to prepare a more in-depth parking study. Our architect has completed, as staff has shown, the revisions requested by the Planning Commission, and is here to present that to you. We also hired a professional traffic engineer, George Gosson, with integrated traffic engineers to complete a third actually I think it's 5th parking study. This parking study, along with the 4 other parking studies prepared for this project, is consistent with our experience in owning and operating hotels. That is, these types of hotels require a parking ratio of 0.7 per room or key. As stated in the hotels like this one we are proposing to develop, there are no restaurants, there is no bar. This is a prototype and is approximately 98 keys. Even on the few occasions the hotel is 100% occupied, the parking ratio is approximately 0.7. One of the commissioners had expressed some concern that there were not enough hotels, including the parking study. We should include other flagged hotels. The traffic count should be for the entire week. And third, confirm that there was no COVID patients staying at the hotel. Pursuant to the foregoing guidance, in addition to the hotels studied, the limited service hotels, Holiday Inn Express, and there's 2 additional hotels which were added. The new parking study includes counts for 6 hotels. 2 of the hotels in this parking study were also Marriott Fairfield Inns located in Camarillo and Moore Park. As per the city requests, accounts occurred on 7 consecutive days. Accounts occurred at 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. In our experience, 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. makes sense because guests check-in starts at 3 p.m. Almost all the time, guests have checked in by 8 p.m. Only at Airport properties do you see occasionally stragglers checking in after 8 p.m. The peak of occupant guests to be in the hotels is 11 p.m. By this time, the guests have checked in, had dinner. Prior to commencing each count, the person doing the count confirmed with such hotel staff what the occupancy is. Most guests start checking out at 7 p.m. and almost all of them, other than the stayovers, have checked out by 11 a.m. Therefore, peak parking would occur between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. At the time the counts occurred, it was confirmed hotels had no COVID guests or in the evening. The applicant has made an earnest effort to follow the city staff's guidance on completing traffic counts and which hotels to use as comparable hotels. Here is a chronology of how, when, and which hotels were studied. As stated, approximately 2 years, a modification to the December 24th Planning Commission approval was filed. In response to our modification request, the city requested for a parking study. The first study was completed by Sam Potts on January 23rd, 2020. This parking study studied the Simi Valley Holiday Inn Express for one night on the night of January 9th, 2020. On February 25th, 2020, an incomplete letter was received from city staff, which included a request to provide a minimum of a 2-day average of parking occupancies on at least 2 hotel sites. Accordingly, on August 2020, Sam Potts completed an updated study. This parking study included the Simi Valley Best Western and the Grand Vista Hotel on the nights of May 7th and June 10th, 2020. Following the November 4th, 2020, the Planning Commission public hearing for this project, staff informed us that an additional parking study covering additional hotels for a full week, completed by a professional traffic engineer company, was requested. They recommended use of hotels by the same franchise in Ventura in order to get accurate counts. In November, Integrated Group completed a supplemental parking study, which included parking occupancy between 11 p.m. 1 a.m. every night from November 11th, 2020 through November 17, 2020. This study covered the Moore Park Fairfield Inn, Camarillo Fairfield Inn, Grand Vista Hotel, Courtyard Marriott, Best Western, Holiday Inn Express. We also appreciate the staff revising the text amendment to so it didn't impact the entire hotels in the city of Simi Valley. That concludes my presentation. I believe we have the architect on the call, Zoom call too. So Jerome, if you're there, and then George, after Jerome presents, if you could present.
Yes, hi, everyone. So staff made a very good presentation. I'm not sure what additional I can show you other than stuff you've already seen. But we have some pretty pictures. See that. If there's any specific questions that maybe anyone has about the architecture, I can field those now.
Evening, Honorable Chair, members of Planning Commission. My name is George Gosen, Principal Engineer with IAG Consulting. I believe that Mr. Singh and staff did a great job, presenting the project and really identifying the process that we went through in order for us to kind of address city staff's concern and requirement, and address also the Planning Commission, comments on the project. So if there's any question in addition to what's been presented, please feel free to ask, and we'll be here to address them. Thank you.
I'm sorry, George, what's your last name?
Gosen.
Gosen? You did the traffic study, right? Or
Yes.
oh, okay. The parking study, really?
Yeah, parking study.
Oh, okay. You heard my question before to staff about this sort of difference between properties with 100 versus less than 100 rooms. And the idea is that there was more amenities being provided in the larger hotel rooms, and therefore they might need some differences. But of course, you could have a hotel with more than 100 rooms and limited or no amenities, such as a restaurant or a public conference area. Do you, in your analysis or study as you were doing this or coming up with these, with your particular work that you did you see anything that would suggest that a hotel with more than 100 rooms would necessarily need more than 0.8 parking spaces per room if they did not have certain amenities such as a restaurant or public conference spaces?
Commissioner Hodge, definitely, the setting, the city, the type of characteristics of these hotels play a big role in the parking demand. So typically, as you mentioned, when you have more amenities such as restaurant, bars, that will most probably require additional parking spaces. But when you have minimal amenities and you have only a hotel with space only for patrons to be in there, not open to only for guests, not open for the public, typically does not require additional parking. So I can confirm that in those type of situations when you go over 100, probably a more detailed surveys that can be done, for these type of restaurants specifically, since the project that we have right now kind of is consistent with the 0.8, knowing that what we came up with is a 79% peak. On an average, you have 75 at the low end, and 0.8 covers it well. But, a good sample, to really address that specific question that you have, and looking at a comparison, apples to apples, when we look at, with and without, all of these hotels are above 100, we can have a better idea of what will be the outcome.
Okay, in the analysis that you've done and the work that you've done, is there some sort of useful definition of restaurant?
We kind of identified the specifics of these restaurants, and what we focused on really on just overall a restaurant, a bar, and a conference area. That's what we looked into, and to make sure that whatever we're proposing as part of this project, whether it's compatible with what we're looking for. And we kind of looked into comparable, locations that are similar to ours, and that's how we came up with the rates that we have. But granted that other locations with higher number of higher number of unit or rooms, it yield a little bit higher. That was on the higher end of the spectrum rather than the lower end of the spectrum. The percentage was a little bit higher in occupancy of parking.
Okay, I believe that's true, but my question is a little different. I'm trying to find out what we're looking at in terms of defining what a restaurant is. Courtyard by Marriott, you get sort of a light breakfast when you come down. Embassy Suites, you get a little more robust breakfast when you come down. Some hotels have small sit-down places where you can get something to eat, but you would trying to think of a good example. Where it's a little more than a Starbucks inside, and there's an area where you could sit down and you could have, sort of minimal food varieties in there. I'm trying to find out if in your studies, if we could leapfrog or borrow, plagiarize, if you will, a good definition of restaurants.
We did not define specifically, to answer your question, we did not define the difference between the restaurants or the operation of these services. Restaurants, we looked at, they provide these restaurants that are open to the public rather than just a facility that provided breakfast in the morning only for, for people utilizing the rooms. I think to Commissioner Hodge, to answer this question, we have to collect data specific to that specific question when it comes to the definition of what is this hotel, what kind of services it provides, and what is the operation of that restaurant. Does that restaurant really provide, lunch or breakfast, lunch and dinner versus only, breakfast? There's so many different services. These hotels, right now they have niches, and you have multiple different hotels and different services that they provide. So, our survey, provided, the information related to the comparison, but we didn't get into the detail as to whether this restaurant provides full service, morning, noon, afternoon, or just a breakfast, for example. On a simple.
I was just hoping that maybe you would make our jobs easier. Thank you, but I appreciate your answer. Thank you very much.
No, not a problem.
Other questions of the applicant? Okay, sorry, go ahead. Commissioner Rice.
Yeah, one question, sir, and that was before on this project, you went to the neighbors and talked to the neighbors, and the neighbors seemed okay with the project. Have you gone back to the neighbors now that the project is taller?
Oh, we had. We went back prior to the last planning commission, and when we had the neighborhood council, and after the last planning commission, the November 4, 2020. In fact, I think Mr. Phil Terry is on the Zoom call too, so he can. I think he's been out there like 4 or 5 times, specifically attempting to speak to the 5 houses which are directly adjacent to the property.
Okay.
So I don't know if Phil Terry he can speak or not, but he can tell you the results of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I got just a couple quick questions. The 8-foot-high concrete masonry wall, which is condition A18, this is to the applicant. Is this going to be a new wall, or are you adding on to the existing approximate 6-foot-high wall?
I mean, it depends on, I mean, we prefer to add on to the existing, but it really depends on the structural engineer, right? He'll have to go out there and make sure that it's structurally sound. If we do it, we, like I said, we that particular wall is on the boundary. So I think we have 5 contiguous neighbors, and that's on the boundary. So we could build a new wall just adjacent to it, which is not our preference. We have, I was hoping maybe Phil could speak to this, but I do have some information that he got letters of support from 2 of the 5 people that he's been trying to get a hold of. 2 of them are rentals, so he's been a little unsuccessful getting a hold of them, and the 3rd person hasn't been in. I mean, our goal is just to extend the existing wall, but we need to get the permission of the neighbors, which we believe we should get, and then after that, it's really up to the structural engineer to make sure that it's structurally sound as well, that we can just add 2 feet to it and it doesn't compromise the stability of the wall.
Okay. My other question is under, these are again, conditions, page 26, by the way. Ventura County Fire Protection District, condition IV, so that should be 9. Covenant deed restrictions against parcels. I'm assuming that these parcels, I didn't have time to look them up, are the big lots, the parking lot, the parcels immediately to the east of your building. I'll just call it the big lots in the Do It Center. I'm assuming that those are the parcels that you have to have a road easement to for your second point of ingress or egress. Has that agreement been done yet?
The deed agreement has not been done. I did speak to Daniel Gold, who's the principal of the shopping center to the east of us, the Big Lots. He seemed amenable to the emergency access easement behind the shopping center. And he said basically as long as the DIY center was on board, he did not have an objection. Mr. Daniel Gold also recognized that the alley, which sits between the shopping center and our property, has been encumbered by utility easements. And so there's nothing that we could really do with that. So you know, and I did speak with the DIY CEO John approximately a year ago. He met me at the property and he seemed amenable to it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Mann, you meant condition 4, correct?
Yes. Thank you. Obviously, I don't read Roman numeral letters, so thank you very much. Condition 4. Man, I'm getting from all sides here. Okay. Do I have any other commissioners with any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Do we receive any requests from members of the public to make a public statement on Zoom on this item?
Yes, Chairman Mann, our assistant planner, Alex Klingman, will be starting the Zoom comments. Alex will take the first speaker.
Good evening, Arash. You are unmuted.
Who do we have with us?
Hello, Arash. You are invited to speak.
Arash, are you with us? Alex, can you tell us? Sorry. Arash, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing well, thank you.
Great. Yeah, so, I want to basically speak in favor of the proposal here. I've actually been pretty lucky. I've had a couple of Teslas. I previously had a Tesla S, and now I have another Tesla S. And, there's a pretty great option on there called it's summoning your car to pick it up once it's on an autonomous drive mode. And, once probably, I think in about 6 months time, I'll be able to basically get an update on the software. Driverless cars are the future, in my opinion. There have been leaps and bounds of progress in the self-driving car industry. Obviously companies like Tesla, Google, Apple, Sony, they're projected to really kind of have this be the leader in the automobile industry. And, it's really looking like self-driving cars are going to be the future. And once this happens, people are going to be, basically having the vehicles drive for themselves. And there's really not going to be too much need for parking, in my opinion, in the near future. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
Heidi, you are unmuted.
Is it Heidi? Are you with us?
I'm sorry, it wasn't allowing me to unmute. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Fine, Heidi, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I appreciate the time to speak with you. Good evening, everyone. I did attend last November in favor of this project, and I've been listening this evening, and I wanted to just sort of give a personal testimony as being a resident in Simi Valley. In fact, I'm only about a mile away from the location. And I have traveled for business extensively for, I would say, about the last 10 years. And much of the time I'm in hotels. And I can honestly say for more than 5 years, I've never submitted an expense report for a rental car. I stay in hotels and I submit lots of expense reports for those stays. And because, obviously in California, we have plentiful, options for rideshare. There's Lyft, there's Uber. I know myself, that's what I'm using all the time. And I just really am struggling with why we wouldn't approve this project when it boils down to, I think someone said 2.5 parking spaces. It just really doesn't sit well with me as a resident. And I could likely bring this to many of my neighbors and fellow community members, and I don't think it would sit well with them either. I mean, we're looking at an empty lot full of garbage sometimes and transients. We're not approving a beautiful building that can offer a lot to the community, allow our friends and family to visit us and stay somewhere nice. And mind you, if they're doing that, we often will pick them up, or again, they are going somewhere that's a few miles away. So they're going to take an Uber or a Lyft. Rent-a-cars, people would rather save those hundreds of dollars. And when they need to go somewhere, they'll call one of those, rideshare options. So I just don't really think that it just doesn't make sense to me that we're not approving this. And, what's the alternative? We leave it empty with transients and other issues like safety. We often can't see some of these people at night, and we could hit them, for goodness sake. So it's just, as a resident, I just really would like you to consider all of the efforts and everything that's gone into this, and please approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Scott, you are unmuted.
Scott, are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Great. I'm going to further what I just heard because I feel the same exact way. I'm a local entrepreneur. I am not far from that location where I employ 25 people. Commissioners, not another minute delay, not another second delay. It should be the day of celebration for Mr. Singh and his partners and the city of Simi Valley. You're going to see a whole heck of a lot more of just like you're seeing right now tonight. Passionate citizens, wild entrepreneurs who do things professionally and properly for their city. What I haven't heard yet is the congratulations to Mr. Singh on generating what potentially could be $800,000 a year. I haven't heard about how it's going to affect the Junkyard Cafe or the gas stations nearby, or the linen cleaning company that is going to come in and pick up the linens. All of the local businesses that are not just the city, $800,000, $600,000 a year, $6 million over 10 years, that it will benefit who? Yeah, the city. But how does that benefit the citizens? Well, the hotel is going to do that for you guys. It's going to make you guys look like heroes. So what we want to see, and what that awesome lady just said, is what we want to see more of. Support from the city commissioners, the planning guys. Help him develop the most incredible project for Simi Valley. Because guys, I know Mr. Singh. He owns other hotels. He does things properly, and he's going to bring the level of energy to the city the way we want to see it, properly, safely. And I think this guy has waited long enough and jumped through every hoop and wall that you have asked him to. So please, guys, do the right thing for him and the next developer that's coming. Let's help him build the wall. And I mean that not literally. But thank you very much for the opportunity. That's all I wanted to say, in full support of the next most beautiful hotel in Simi Valley. Have a great night.
Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, Blossom. You are unmuted.
Is it Blossom? Are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for letting us have a platform to speak. I am a resident of Simi Valley for 12 years. I also am a current staff member at Adventist Health Simi Valley. I would like to just talk a little bit about how this hotel is going to be walking distance to our facility and all the other medical facilities that are right there. As you know, through the pandemic, we all pulled together, worked really hard. A lot of staff members were actually given vouchers to go stay at hotels during the pandemic. I kind of looked at the hotels only in Simi Valley, and I know it's approximately 633 rooms for what are our population, 125,000 approximately. And I agree with the other members of Simi Valley in our community that if it's coming down to 2 parking spaces, you know, we have to also remember that we have Postmates, DoorDash, all of these new and upcoming food delivery services that are in our community, and all the revenue that this hotel will provide. I think it is important as we grow in our community, technology and innovations. I think it's important for our community. And as a longtime community member, I support this project, and I hope that you guys can see that the other members of Simi Valley, I think your majority vote would be in favor of this project. Thank you for hearing me. Have a good night.
Thank you very much for your time. Next caller.
Philip Terry, you are unmuted.
Mr. Terry, you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
By all means, please go ahead. 5 minutes, sir.
You couldn't hear me earlier. Well, we've worked on this project for a long time. I've been there since 2012 when we started. As far as, there was a question earlier, as far as the neighbors, I've spoke with every neighbor in that whole neighborhood, and in the past couple of months, I've been by probably 7 times, and even was there this morning and captured another signature from the neighbors in regards to the wall, which they seem to be fine with. There are 2 houses that are rental houses. So we still need to try to contact those owners. And other than that, most people have been very nice and very cooperative about things. There is one neighbor at the very end of the corner that she hasn't been that cooperative, but I'll make sure she comes around to let us do the wall for her, and I think it'll be great. So if there was any other question, I know that I was trying to get on. I don't know, it wasn't working, but other than that, I think it's a good project. It was a great project before when we were approved, and I think we'd like to get move forward. That's about it.
Thank you very much. And I think we have one more caller.
We have no other public comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments from staff regarding statements made during the public hearing? Public comment.
Yes, Chairperson Mann. Wanted to respond actually to Commissioner Hodge with regard to what a restaurant is defined as. Needed to look it up, but per the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual, a restaurant is defined as full service. So that would include wait staff, bussers, what have you. So somebody at the counter that would actually provide you, maitre d', that sort of a thing. So it would be above and beyond the continental breakfast style that comes along with a lot of these developments or hotels. As far as the wall is concerned, in addition to being a traffic engineer, I'm also a licensed civil engineer, so I have a little bit of expertise in this regard. Generally speaking, and we can wait for the structural engineer, but adding to the top of a stem, which is what the wall is considered, is an added weight that the footing may not support, because the footing is defined for the weight and the surcharge of the soil over the top of the footing. So you can't just add to the top of a wall and expect it not to topple over, either in the interim or a long-term period. So again, structural engineer would need to analyze that, but more likely than not, adding 2 feet to a wall is not going to work. As far as comments from the public, the difference in 2.5 spaces, as Commissioner Rice alluded to, was actually the difference in ratio between 0.8 and 0.83, which is what the Parking Generation Manual came back with on 98 rooms. So that is the difference in the number of spaces between those 2 ratios. The difference in the number of spaces between 0.8 and what the current code is actually 20 spaces. So it would go from 98 to 78. So that's the distinction there. As far as Uber and Lyft are concerned, they are actually addressed in the parking study and are used for justification for the reduction in the ratio. And that is all I have.
Oh, thank you very much. Would the applicant or any other staff have any other comments?
No other comments at this point.
Would the applicant like to respond to any of the comments regarding statements made during the public hearing?
No, we're fine, thanks.
Okay, I'm losing my mind. Okay, if there's no further questions, then we're going to close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Are there any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
I just have one question.
By all means, please.
That was, somebody mentioned their Tesla. And so do we have any, and again, I apologize, this is a lot and I'm still very new to this the project and catching up from the stuff from last year. Are there any electric spots, parking spots for electric vehicles on this project?
I can address that. Currently, we're doing regular spaces and handicap spaces. Accessible spaces. The code, current California Building Code does have requirements for, and the Energy Code have requirements for a percentage of those spaces to be electrified, yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other commissioners have any other questions?
I have a comment.
Okay, by all means,
and
please.
You could call this question if you like. One of the things, I mean, I appreciate the definition of a restaurant. I'm not sure that that's all that helpful to us because there are other circumstances where those kinds of services, food services, could create a lot of additional need for parking, such as is identified on page 5 of the staff report regarding land uses for the hotels with more than 100 rooms, banquet facilities. So one of the things that larger hotels will have is room for banquets, for meetings, weddings, a number of different things that you might need some space for a gathering, awards banquet. I mean, those kinds of things, and they're definitely the kind of thing that requires some thought regarding future parking needs. So, without regard to the idea that restaurant need be a full serve host, restaurant waiters, wait staff, that kind of thing. I mean, you could have a successful smorgasbord or all you could eat or something like that could create a lot of traffic. So I'd like to sort of leave that open. But when it comes to one of the thoughts that I have, and I'm curious what everybody else thinks about the idea of opening up and not creating this bright line at 100 rooms, and instead saying 0.8 parking spaces per room for facilities that, unless, and it could be all sizes, it could be 1,000 rooms for all sizes, unless there are additional amenities such as conference rooms to the public, banquet facilities, restaurants, etc. And then once those additional amenities are added on, then you go into the site-specific parking study to determine whether or not that particular property has enough parking, specifically based upon, for example, the size of the banquet area, the size and amount and service characteristics of the restaurant, something specific that the applicant could come forward, as opposed to, once they get to past 99, bingo, all of a sudden they've got to start, with an additional 25%. When you add 20% on to 0.8, well, 0.2 onto 2.8, onto 0.8, that's 25% more parking, and then all this additional parking for employees, et cetera. So what I'm thinking, and what I'm curious what the other commissioners think of, is just 0.8 across the board, unless the project includes public conference services, eating amenities, et cetera. And then at that point, you have to consider, they have to present a specific parking study to determine whether or not what they're imagining on they need will be consistent with what the specific services they will actually supply will mandate.
Okay, any commissioners have any comments on that?
I like that concept tremendously. I think as opposed to trying to go with a less than 100 and over 100, we go with the 0.8 unless they have additional amenities. I think it's a great idea moving forward.
Yeah, I have to agree with Commissioner Hodge on this, is that it doesn't, when you look at the unit that was going to go from under 100 and at the 98 units, that would have been 98 units would have been 78 parking spaces. But if they added the 16, then they would need to have 114. And the difference between that was adding 16 units added 36 parking spots. It just doesn't seem, if there isn't a restaurant and there isn't the needs, it seems as though, the years I've been doing financial analysis, it would never have made sense to me that having an arbitrary number of 100 doesn't necessarily mean that your parking requirements go up. I have to agree that there are other things that make the parking requirements. If there's a banquet room, if there's a restaurant, if there's a bar, if there's entertainment, if there's a lot of things that we could be looking at to say, these are the reasons why parking is needed and additional parking is necessary. But to just have an arbitrary number of 100 units doesn't make any sense. So I think that we definitely should be looking into a better formula on hotels going forward for the city. Because if it is just a hotel without a banquet room, without a bar, without restaurants, without anything that would bring additional people to the hotel, there doesn't seem like if the 0.8 is going to be the study that everybody is going off of, there's no reason why you add 16 units and all of a sudden you have to have 36 additional parking spots. So I agree with Commissioner Hodge on that.
Other commissioners, comments?
Yeah, my problem with this parking study is that we're basing everything on this parking study that was put together by the applicant. And also too, that just happens that this fits for this project. And that's how we come up with this 0.8. I would rather, I mean, I know it's only 2 spaces for this particular project, but I think going forward, the 0.83 makes more sense to me. It's just more of a closer to a national guideline that we should go through. We're still reducing the number of parking spaces on hotels, in this case by at least 18 spaces. So that's where I'm at on this one. I just think that picking this number 0.8 is just kind of arbitrary.
Would that mean this project wouldn't go forward?
Well, you know what? I would even be willing to make an exception for this project if we look at 0.83. I mean, if that's what it takes. I mean, look, I like this project. I have one big issue besides this little thing, because it affects every project from now on. Okay? I have one other issue, which is the height of the building, but that we haven't got to that yet. But as far as the spaces, I'm okay with reducing the number of parking spaces, and whether we go with what the other commissioners want or what I want, we're still drastically reducing the number of spaces for it. I just think this 0.8 is here because it fits this project. I don't think it's here because for any reason other than that.
Yeah, my comment is to our expert traffic engineer and now parking engineer. Is there a reason not to have the 0.8 for hotels, regardless of what the size is?
So should probably be making the distinction here. The 0.83 is actually for this project specifically. So based on the trip generation manual, it's 0.83 spaces for a 98-room hotel.
Okay.
As the number of rooms fluctuates, then the parking requirements and the number of spaces actually changes. So it is dependent upon the number of rooms, which is essentially why we looked at this 100 and below. Otherwise, the ratio completely changes.
Okay, so there is some reasoning why the city said or came up with this at hotels, motels, parking, plus or minus 100 rooms.
That is correct.
Okay. Because, I mean, we have 2 different things here. One, we have the parking moving for this one and moving forward. Now, obviously, we have this project. I mean, we could easily separate the 2 out. We could approve this part, but put the further parking off for another study, how that's going to come about, I have no idea.
I'd even be okay with that.
I think we're pretty close with coming with a consensus on what the parking could be.
Right.
Moving forward. Let's not waste future time and efforts.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to address, and I respect Commissioner Rice a great deal. We've worked on the commission now for quite some time, and I find that he's very frequently quite right. And I understand the concept that it's sort of amazing that the analysis perfectly fits in, with the demand and the need for this particular application. And I appreciate how sometimes that coincidence seems less than coincidental. But one of the things that I was thinking about, and the one piece of information I don't think is in the staff report, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But the way they did this study, I was pleased to see that what they did is they didn't do the parking demand for the hotel for example, when they went there was 37 cars in the lot for the Holiday Inn Express. I hate that. I don't even think that the Holiday Inn Express makes any sense. So let's go to the Courtyard by Marriott. This is all on page 4 in the staff report. The Courtyard by Marriott had 42 cars, and there were 53 rooms booked, which was a 79.2% utilization of parking based upon the rooms booked, as if that 53 was 100% that was a sellout. So assume that they only had 53 rooms and they sold out, they had 42 parking spaces being utilized, which represented 79.2%. But of course, the Courtyard by Marriott has more rooms. 53 is not, where they are, and they have quite a bit more. And then the paragraph under that, and the next paragraph under that talks about a peak occupancy at 86.7% for these hotels in January 2008 to February 2020. That was in the study. So the hotels are seldom not sold out. And if they're not sold out, then they're going to need less parking spaces at any percentage. You could require 5. And if that room's not sold, well, guess what? They don't need those 5 parking spaces. So that, to me, I felt a little bit more assuaged about my concerns that they're cutting the bread awfully thin here at 0.8 when you've got, properties with peak demand at 79.2%. That's 0.8%. And that seems to be pretty fine cutting. But at the same time, these hotels aren't frequently sold out. One thing I didn't see in here, and I'd be happy if staff could disabuse me of the notion, is there, not in the last year, but prior to March of 2018, what percentage of times are these hotels sold out? 20% of the year, 2% of the year, 3 months a year during summer? I'm very curious to know how frequently these hotels are at 100% occupancy, and they're at those points testing the boundaries of the parking demand.
We don't have any of the data prior to 2018. The study shows just that they did that estimated between 2018 and 2020. But otherwise, we don't have the data that you're asking for, Commissioner Hodge.
So when you said that hotel occupancy in the second paragraph underneath the grid on page 4, the study indicated that the hotel occupancy, this is obviously not your study, but the study that was presented, indicated that the hotel occupancy in the city of Simi Valley pre-pandemic, which is good because you can use it, peaked at 86.7% in August 2019. Does that mean that utilization of rooms in Simi Valley for hotels in August of 2019 averaged 86.7% room occupancy?
Yes, basically that's what it means.
So if that's the average occupancy, I'm curious to know how many times on average the properties sell out. If that number is significant, then it gives me more concern for Commissioner Rice's comments. And I'm with him in terms of wanting to figure out a way to get this done. And one of the things that we, at least I said when we had the last meeting was that I didn't think that the study was sufficiently prepared, which is why the last time when it came to us, which is why I'm glad that this was done and the study was done. And it's a much better study. This gives me some pause to say this is perhaps compelling enough where we can reduce the city requirement from 0.1 to 0.8 across the board. And that's why I'm fairly confident with it. But that one little piece of data seems to be missing here. How many nights a year on average do our hotels sell out?
Commissioner Hodge, if I may correct my statement, actually it is a peak capacity of 86.7%. It's not an average. So it's already been, the average is probably going to be way lower than that, with the peak is at 86.7.
Well, it says hotel occupancy peaked at 86.7%. To me, that's as plain as the day is long. It means that was the average occupancy, 86.7. And that was the peak. That was the highest it was. In other months before that, it was 85, 82, whatever, 79. But the hotel occupancy in the city was 86.7% within the city in August of 2019. If that's wrong, I'd be surprised. Meaning wrong interpretation of this. I'm a little less concerned than Commissioner Mann about, I'm sorry, not Commissioner Mann, Commissioner Rice about the 0.83 versus the 0.8. You know, I do think that that it's sufficient. One of the things I was really curious about, and maybe this could be, we could go 0.83, and for this project, you know, what they were going to talk to the property owner to the south, which they said that they're not interested in speaking right now. I was looking at that parking lot from above, and it doesn't look like it's sufficiently well utilized. It seems to me that, you know, the way they drew it, it probably could fit more parking spaces on that particular parcel, and so that maybe, you know, that would be sufficient if they have a, you know, I hate to condition it on the basis that the southern landowner would have a reciprocal parking agreement with them, because, you know, maybe they won't. Those are ideas. I mean, I'm not sold on any particular position, and I'm very curious to know everybody else's thoughts.
Okay. Other commissioners, other thoughts?
If we're happy with 0.83 and with the conditions on other amenities with a site-specific parking study, let's close in on this and make everybody happy and move forward.
What would happen to this project at 0.83?
2.34 parking spots short. But if you're looking at 86 point, what was that? The max capacity in August?
86.7.
Okay, so 86.7, how could I use that number? So if they're 98 units and it's 0.867, that's 85 units occupied. And at 0.8, I mean, you're just talking you're still at a decent parking.
But Commissioner, when they're talking about 86.7 or 89.7, they're talking about an average of all the hotels, not a specific hotel. So some of the hotels may be at 100% capacity, and others may be at 70% capacity.
Right. And the other thing is, if we choose 0.83, they have to comply with 0.83. This project would have to comply with 0.83, and I don't think that at this point they can do it. I don't think that that's a dramatic reason to say, well, then we should change it to 0.8, because now you're making, you know, decisions for the future of the city and for every project that comes along down the road, because you wanted to shoehorn one particular project in. But are there other options? Is there something else that we can do here to adopt 0.83 and figure out a way to approve this particular project as it's currently parked? And I don't know. And it's so, you know, I lean back to Mr. Gibson and his staff to tell us if there's an option.
We can do that.
Certainly.
We can totally approve this at the current level and
then we
change the zoning to 0.83, then they don't comply. How can we do that?
Commissioner Hodge, that's an excellent point that you're bringing up. In reality, if you were to require, this is a recommendation to council because you haven't attached a zone text amendment. But if you were to require the 0.83 parking spaces for this particular project and you approve it at efficient, of 2 spaces less, because 2.34 we round down, you're actually approving a parking reduction, which is not necessarily allowed by the code. So it's not just a matter of like, we can approve the project with less parking the way it is and keep the zone, the code amendment to 0.83, and because then this project will not qualify, they will have to find the extra 2 parking spaces. And Mr. Gibson, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, the alternative to that is if you do the 0.83 ratio, which would result in a parking shortage of approximately 3 spaces, more or less, you would have to condition the approval to eliminate 2 or 3 of the rooms to comply.
Thoughts? If we want to approve the project, then it looks like we have to approve it at the 0.8.
But if we're approving the project at 0.8, we're approving future projects at 0.8 as well. That's my point.
Really quick, in order to, you will have to reduce 3 guest rooms in order to make the 0.83 parking spaces.
Yes, unfair to the developer. But again, I mean, we can approve this at 0.8, and again, leave the limitation in for, with hotels less than 100 rooms at 0.08. And the rooms more than 100, they stay with what they currently have. And again, the 0.08 is for any hotel, if we leave it as the city had done it, okay, English major, with 100 rooms or less, with the exception of unless they cannot have restaurants, coffee shops, meeting rooms, otherwise they need to do additional parking on top of that.
I'd be okay with that.
I think that just may be the easiest way to make this thing work, which is basically approve it with, leaving the limitations in with the 100 rooms or less at 0.8. That gets this project approved. And then any other project that follows, if they're in these specific parameters without the restaurant, coffee shop, meeting rooms, they would get the benefit of 0.08, so a difference of 0.03 rooms, so 2 out of 100. That's not a sword I'm willing to die on. I'm okay with that.
Or we could actually bring up to over 100 rooms at a later date.
Correct. Well, no, actually, because what's the current code now?
Well, the current code is 1 space per room.
Right.
For everything, so we're not really changing the over 100 at all.
Right.
And
We're just lowering under 100 to be 0.8.
this, the proposed amendment as it's written in the report, again, would just affect proposed hotels that are less than 100 rooms. And keep in mind that it's really up to the hotel developer to figure out how many spaces they really want. 0.8 is just the bare minimum.
Right.
They may have game plans and marketing studies to require additional parking. We're not stopping them from providing 1 space per room, 1.2 spaces per room. That's up to them.
You know what I'd like to do, I think, is to take a step back from the 0.83. I'm looking at the peak demand. The Fairfield Inn in Camarillo is 75%. The Fairfield Inn in Moore Park, 77.1%. The Courtyard and the Grand Vista are the ones that sort of push the envelope here a little bit. I've been to the Grand Vista on a number of occasions where there have been very large gatherings, banquets for all kinds of things, and I've never had a problem finding a place to park ever. I don't know about. I've been to the Courtyard Marriott to visit a family that have come to visit. And it's 79.2, and I think that's close to the 0.8. But with the thought that in the future, I'm not convinced that Lyft and Uber are going to survive. I'm really not. They're losing money hand over fist now, and I mean, who knows if that model is ever going to work? Maybe one day when they do get to driverless vehicles, but I still think that I wonder about that. I'm comfortable with using 0.8. I'm comfortable with using 0.8 for all hotels in the city, with the exception of those that have other amenities that attract outside uses. And I could go there. I think that the 0.8 and the 0.83, creates a distinction. I don't know if it's a distinction with a difference. So I'm comfortable with 0.8, all hotels within the city, with the exception of what we talked about before with those that have services that require more, and then they would have to have the parking proposal.
Now, are you saying all hotels or hotels less than the 100 rooms?
All.
Oh, see, I kind of like leaving the parameter of less than 100 rooms because from our traffic and parking engineer, there's some differences with rooms over 100. So I'd rather.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Mann, but wasn't that difference because of the idea that there would be additional amenities?
Correct.
And if there aren't additional amenities, then I don't think that should be, a concern. And then if you've got under 100, so you've got under 100 units, and they've got a restaurant and this banquet parking or banquet services, and they're under 100. Well, guess what? Then they darn well better come up with a parking proposal so that we could account for this higher intensity of use. So my thought is what the question is does a particular hotel have services and amenities that would attract people to come to it that aren't staying at the hotel as a guest? If that's true, then they need to provide more parking and they have to do a parking study. if the hotel doesn't have it, whether it's 101 or 100, I mean, you're gonna compress any future applicant to stick under 100, because if they go over 100, oh my goodness, the additional costs would be extraordinary, versus under 99 or 99 and under. So I like, that's my thought. That's my proposal. I'm not going to get very concerned about 0.3%. I understand the reasoning, because it's a good solid number that's provided by a national service for the national need. But this particular proposal here, talked about the two in the Fairfield and Moore Parks right off the freeway, just like this one would be. I don't know where the one in Camarillo is. That's 77%. So, I mean, I'm not too concerned about 0.3%.
Okay, our city attorney, David Caceres, has a comment.
I just want to make sure that the commission understands that the way it was agendized, we're having a discussion about making an amendment to Title IX to reduce parking requirements for hotels and motels with 100 or fewer rooms. I don't think it was technically agendized for a discussion on whether or not we would have a new ratio for all hotels in the city of Simi Valley.
Okay.
That's a shame.
So
if that's true, then I can I'm good with the way, then I'm good with the way it's written.
Okay. Other comments?
I have a different issue.
Okay. What's your issue?
Okay, so this is a 4-story hotel. How many other 4-story buildings do we have in the city? That's a question, yeah.
I believe the Courtyard Bar Marriott is one of the 4-story projects in town.
Okay, and on the 3 sides of this project, the 3 adjacent properties are all 1-story, is that correct? Well, I mean, I know that those houses, I think one of them is a 2-story, but the Do-It Center's, down lower, and the Junkyard is lower because of the slope. So this will be 4 stories. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that
The junkyard is 2 stories.
I'm sorry?
The junkyard is 2 stories.
Junkyard is 2 stories.
Because there's the
corrected.
Cupids.
Oh, that's right, because it's into the hill.
Yeah, they're on the second
Right.
floor.
Okay. But my point is that, if we allow this to be 4 stories, then the project next to it wants to go in, they're going to want 4 stories. And then the people next to them want 4 stories. I just think we're opening Pandora's box by doing this. And I know that the code says 3 stories, and now suddenly nobody's brought it up that this is a full story taller than what we have. And that's my concern.
I have a question of staff to follow up on Commissioner Mann's question.
Okay.
On page 7 of the original proposal, the one that I believe it's the one that we approved. No, this is a staff report dated November 4, 2020. The height requirements, this is my question for staff. What was approved? I think we approved this in 2014, and Commissioner Rice and I were both on the commission at the time, but I don't remember. But taking a look at this one grid on page 7 of Exhibit 4, the main building height was 51 feet 8 inches. The lobby tower was 56.10. The bell tower was 66. That's been eliminated.
Right.
So it seems to me that the height required, the height that they're looking at here is the same as at least what was in the staff report back in November of 2020. And I'm curious if that's the same thing that was approved in 2014, the same height that was approved in 2014.
The building height that was approved in 2014 for the main building was 42 feet 10 inches. The bell tower was 58 feet 2 inches. The lobby tower was 53 feet.
And I'm looking at another exhibit, and I'm looking at a grid. This is table 4 on page 51 of the staff report, and they're referring to, oh, that's setbacks. That's setbacks. All right. So we're going from how many feet? Well, let me ask the real, for me, the primary question. what does the code say about maximum height for projects like this?
You can exceed 48 feet when you provide independent setbacks from the adjoining property lines. It's not just, it's 3 stories or 48 feet at the standard setbacks. The 4th floor, which is now proposed, triggers the additional setbacks, and it's indicated in Table 4, page 51 of the November staff reports. Halfway back in your packet, the required setbacks are 51 feet, 8 inches. And there are special findings to deviate from those setbacks, which were indicated in the Planning Commission findings, such as the freeway setback.
This is coming back to me. So we made these special findings because the setback issue had to do with the freeway.
Well,
not
your recommendation tonight would address those special findings, because that is the current item being considered.
So I'd love to hear staff's thoughts about what setbacks are, if any, are inadequate now at 56 feet. Is it essentially the same situation and conditions that we looked at before in 2014, where the special conditions are related to, not a sufficient setback, or typically not an approved setback, but only as to the freeway? Or is it now, because of its height, inappropriate for other adjoining uses?
Well, in 2014, we didn't have the 4th floor, so the setback analysis was slightly different.
I get it. So, I mean, I assume that we looked at this for this project with the higher project, the greater height of this the proposal. I'm sure we took a look at, the impact with respect to setbacks.
That would have been in your November 2020 hearing, which was continued to tonight.
Not to interrupt, but our city attorney, David Caceres, has another comment.
Apologize, I don't always want to be the bearer of bad news, but I want to remind the commission that this particular planning commission continued the prior hearing to tonight to address 4 recommendations, which is to eliminate the bell tower, increase the westerly property line block wall to 8 feet, include additional information for the parking analysis, and consider a shared parking agreement with the property to the south. So the problem is, again, it has to do with the agenda and what was agendized for a discussion. So the height issue, and Claudia, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, that was already identified and discussed at the prior commission meeting. Is that correct? Claudia? My question was that the height issue was already discussed at the prior planning commission meeting on this topic, on this subject.
Correct. The height, that was the 4 stories, and the height was already discussed before.
But isn't there a change in the height from the November?
No, actually, the 4-story hotel revision was approved in 2017, and actually what was reduced in height was the bell tower.
Right. But I thought the height of part of this went from 42 to 51.
Let me go back. This is some of my backup slides over here, so let me just go back to that screen really quick, and I can share it with you if you like. Let me just.
The previous approved hotel from 2014 was at 42 feet 10 inches, the main building, and now the main building is proposed at 51 feet 8 inches. On page 2 of Exhibit 4.
Yeah, but I don't recall us approving the setbacks when we said that we wanted to address other issues. I don't remember there was ever a finding that approved the setbacks and the failure to comply with the required setbacks in this case for the northeast and south. So my question to the city attorney is, I'm sorry, the assistant city attorney is, do we have to make findings specific to those, the conditions for the setbacks for those adjoining uses? Because of, do we have to find special conditions that allows them to build without providing those setbacks? I think we probably do.
I do. I'm just still concerned with making sure that we comply with the Brown Act. And this Planning Commission continued the hearing previously to address these 4 recommendations, which I already enunciated. So the problem is, the applicant, out of fairness of the applicant, he was prepared to address these 4 issues, and he has. So if we want to kind of go back in time and address other issues, we, theoretically, you'd have to continue the meeting. This particular.
So because we continued the meeting, we never voted on the whole shooting match. We never said we approve it everywhere except for these issues. So just because we wanted to have the applicant address these issues, are you saying that we can't address the other remaining issues that were extant during the November meeting, but not ruled on?
Well, if this planning commission were to deny this particular project, then this would give some ammunition to the applicant to argue that procedural due process was not followed correctly. He thought he was just going to identify or address these issues, and he can argue that, well, if I knew that the height was an issue, I would have addressed it beforehand.
But we're talking about a change in the height. That was my question, is there a change in the height besides the bell tower?
The answer, the bell tower has been reducing.
No,
in
not
height.
the bell tower, the rest of the project. Is there anything else on the project? Because the bell
No.
tower, that was one of the issues.
The rest of the building stayed the same.
It's
as
the
what you
same.
saw
Okay,
in
that was my
November
question. So
2020.
that's then, okay, I understand.
And as Mr. Gibson just pointed out here, your role here is to provide a recommendation to the city council.
Okay, so I understand you're concerned with the height, and you actually, in the prior meeting, brought that up. And I understand that if Mr. Singh was not given the opportunity to say that, we would be addressing that, even though in the notes, Commissioner Rice went on the record of saying he had some concerns on the height. But I don't know whether or not we have said to Mr. Singh, the height's going to be addressed again or not addressed again. But if it's just Commissioner Rice having a concern on the height, the rest of us don't, it may be a moot point.
Right.
Moving forward. So I don't know if the other commissioners have the same concerns, and certainly if Commissioner Rice has a height, he has the right to say no to the project. And if the project goes on or fails, it does so on its own free will. Like you said, it's a recommendation to the city council. We're not saying yes or no, we're just making the recommendation.
Right.
So I think we can, note his concern for the record and a possible objection for the record, but I think we proceed with a vote for whether or not we're going to approve this project. And in addition to the parking, changing the parking, as you so eloquently said, to leave it in place for because we're only addressing under 100 units, so basically to take the city's recommendation so that we don't get in trouble with a Brown Act violation on that one either.
Right. Or give the applicant an argument.
Correct. So all those little nuances aside, do we have any other questions from commissioners for staff? Okay. Any other comments from the city attorney? See, you come up here and you actually get to say things. We like it when you're up here. Yes. Okay. May I please have a reading of the resolution?
Resolution number SVPC 08-2021, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley recommending to the City Council approval of the modification of conditional use permit CUP-S-744 MOD number 1 to construct a hotel at 2585 Cochrane Street to reduce the number of guest rooms from 106 to 98, modify the building and site configuration, increase the building from 3 to 4 stories, a development code text amendment Z-S-751, revising portions of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code to reduce the parking requirements for hotels, and adoption of the project negative declaration.
The only thing in there doesn't say anything about hotels to the 0.8 parking spaces. Does that need to be in there, or is that understood and agreed when we talk about the ZS 751 is for hotels less than 100 rooms to be 0.8 plus?
That's in the motion, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions before they vote on the motion? Okay, sorry.
Has there been a motion?
Oh, sorry, we have reading the resolution. Okay, now let's try again.
You have to close the public testimony.
I already did that. Do I need to do it again? I didn't open it again. We closed the public testimony, and then we went to the questions of the staff consider public. Okay, just for the record, we're going to close the portion of the public testimony portion of the hearing. Okay, we have the reading of the resolution. Now, the chair will entertain a motion.
I move.
I would like to motion
Okay,
to approve as stated in your resolution.
I'll second.
we have a motion by Commissioner Gray. We have a second by Vice Chair Tolson. Sorry for the prior faux pas of not using your proper title.
Are you including the 0.8 parking spaces?
That is part of the motion, yes.
And it's as amended?
Well, the
no?
ZS751 is for hotels less than 100. We're changing the parking requirements just to a straight 0.8. That is what that motion ZS751 is. Okay.
Well, slow down. I agree with Commissioner Rice on this because the proposal actually is 0.8 spaces per guest room and employee parking in addition to restaurants and the addition of restaurants and coffee shops requiring a site-specific parking study. So it's not just 0.8. We should be precise about this.
So my understanding is ZS 751 is changing hotels and motels of less than 100 rooms to be that entire paragraph, 0.8 space per guest room for guests and employee parking. The addition of restaurants, coffee shops, and/or meetings or banquet rooms open to the public will require a site-specific parking study to determine additional required parking. That is what ZS 751 is. We're changing.
I get it. I would have loved to have seen that in because that's 90% of what we talked about tonight.
Yeah, because that was not in the background,
All right.
but that's what I was assuming is that we were including that if there was restaurants, et cetera, more than,
If there's additional coffee shops, restaurants, and/or meeting or banquet rooms, then they'll have to do a specific, site-specific parking study.
correct.
For hotels less than 100 rooms, that, in my understanding, is what ZS 751 is.
Very good.
Then we're on the same page.
We all agree? So with that, we all know what we're voting on. Okay. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Hodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Gray,
I'm in a, yes.
Sorry. I forgot to lock my vote in.
the motion passes 4-1.
There is no appeal period for CUP S 744 mod number 1 and ZS 751, and these items will proceed to the City Council with the Planning Commission's recommendation with three or more affirmative votes. This item will proceed to the City Council with the recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Chairperson Mann,
Yes.
those of us participating in the meeting virtually were not able to know what the vote was in terms of who voted for what.
My apologies. Can you please read the official vote results?
4 yes, Commissioner Rice voted no.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much for that correction. Okay, moving on. Oh, congratulations, Mr. Singer, in order for moving forward to the city council.
Congratulations and thank you, staff.
Moving on, new business, I have nothing. Oral communications reports. Does staff have anything to report?
Yes, Chairman and members of the commission, I will announce that we have a tentative planning commission meeting for June 9th. It will include potentially another zoning text amendment for one of our many code updates that we're working on, and also the housing element informational presentation, our fourth one, and this one will come out with the draft housing element, including the listing of potential sites for the RENA number calculations. So we'll look forward to that draft housing element presentation, and we'll look forward to your questions and comments on June 9th, along with members of the public for that presentation.
Do any planning commissioners have anything to report?
I do quickly. We'll all recall that we recently approved the use by, I think the project was by Amazon up at the top of Madera, the old B of A building. And it was, I think it was months ago. Well, I was told today they opened and they're running. Is that true, Mr. Gibson?
Yes, that is true. They have at least temporary occupancy, and I know they're still doing some minor work, but they do have their temporary certificate of occupancy, and per your observations, they are running vans up there.
And I tell you that I went to the Burbank airport today, and Amazon has added significant amounts of building over there, and the buildings are beautiful. And I don't know that they're nice and very nice. I think we should look hard at the projects as those come up again in our town. But yeah, I was told that the one up there in Madera opened today. I was really surprised.
What business is that? I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of your comment.
Up there at the top of Madera, you know, we approved the old B of A building, this derelict building that was going to have to be knocked. It was repurposed.
Amazon's there.
Oh, thank you. That's what I missed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mobile Home Rent Mediation Board.
No items.
Tree Advisory Board.
No items.
This concludes the meeting of May 19th, 2021. Next scheduled meeting is June 9th, 2021. This meeting is adjourned.